Hello fellas, I hope you're having a fantastic day. Recently there was an update to AMS2 that added in GT3 and GT4 cars, along with the Nürburgring, with the Nordschleife coming next week. Because I'm a GT3 nerd that really only plays Assetto Corsa Competizione, I wanted to make a comparison video going over the similarities and differences between AMS2's GT3s and ACC's GT3s. Today we're going to be going over three different things: physics, force feedback, and enjoyment. Also, just to be clear, this is not a review of AMS2 or anything, it's just a comparison between ACC and AMS2, and just so you know, I've never driven anything faster than a 2007 Scion TC in real life, so whenever I mention anything being realistic or anything having to do with realism, I really have no basis in reality, it's just what I perceive it to be. I think I'm having an existential crisis now. Now real quick before we get into the meat and potatoes of this video, I do have a Twitch channel. I do stream on there almost daily. I do a bunch of community events in ACC mostly and a bunch of league races, and I would love to see you over there. It's a really good time. Link in the description. Go check it out. Okay, so let's start off with physics. In Assetto Corsa Competizione, the car as a whole feels very connected to the road. It feels like the car is almost in the road, as opposed to just kind of driving along the surface. I hope that makes sense. Now the same is with AMS2 in a less realistic way. There tends to be a lot more grip in low speed corners, a lot more than you'd expect, and it almost feels like the tires don't scrub at all. For a bit of a better example, let's take Sector 1 at Nürburgring. Turns 2, 3, and 4 in specific, or the Mercedes Arena, I think that is. And AMS2, it almost feels like you're legitimately on rails, like you're in a Formula 3 car going real slow. And especially at turn 2. Once you start to accelerate about halfway through the corner, your front end doesn't lose grip. Your front end keeps the same amount of grip throughout the entire corner. And that, I think, is where the weird extra grip at low speed starts to come in. In ACC, at turn 2, you would very much understeer throughout the last half of that corner because it's a bit off camber and it's starting to go downhill, which does make it a bit more difficult, but I don't think the added difficulty is why it's more realistic. I think it's because that off camber, that going downhill, the front end starting to wash out, makes a bit more sense to me than how it is handled in AMS2. Moving on to high-speed stuff, in Assetto Corsa Competizione, high-speed understeer tends to bleed in when you try to push a car past its limit in a high-speed corner. Understeer meaning no grip in the front, but grip in the rear. This usually happens when there isn't enough downforce at the front, or you're trying to add too much steering lock and the tires physically don't have the grip to accommodate that. The feeling of understeer in ACC feels natural. It happens in specific areas of a corner. It usually doesn't happen throughout an entire corner unless your setup is totally wrong, and you can generally feel the car start to grip back up. And AMS2, understeer bleeds in similar to ACC, but the way the car grips up is where I have a bit of a problem with it. The way it grips up is a lot more sudden, and it almost immediately grips up in a way that it does in low speed corners, but slightly differently. It's interesting. Again, I don't know which way is more realistic. I've never driven a race car, let alone a GT3 car. I've never even seen a race car in person. But these are just the differences that I notice. Now the tire model in ACC is my favorite tire model for GT3 out of any other sim that I've played. And it really does feel like you're driving on rubber, and you can really feel where the tires have grip, where they start to scrub, and you can really ride that limit of scrubbing to find that optimal performance from your tires. The tire model for GT3s and AMS2 don't feel like they have as much detail. I can't feel very much in terms of where they have grip and where they don't, and I feel like some of that is issues related to the force feedback, which we'll get into later. The sensation of not really feeling where the tires start to scrub, in my opinion, is similar to R-Factor 2, and the way the GT3 cars handle in AMS2 in general feel kind of reminiscent of R-Factor 2's, just without as much detail on force feedback and more grip at low speed. If you can't tell, I tend to prefer ACC's physics, but I don't think AMS2 is that far off. Now, moving on to force feedback. Assetto Corsa Competizione has some of the best feedback out there, in my opinion, rivaling R-Factor 2, and I think sometimes surpassing R-Factor 2 in terms of feeling what the tires are doing. I personally had to crank the road details in my wheels force feedback software to actually feel what the car was doing and what the track was trying to convey. Otherwise, it just felt like the wheel got really heavy, didn't convey much info, and just kind of jolted around whenever you hit a curb. Also, let's not mention the actual seizure your wheel has when you let go of it. There's not much else to say. AMS2's force feedback is decent, but it needs a lot more tweaking than ACC to get it to feel sort of decent. Now, finally, enjoyment. I know it seems like sim racers aren't allowed to enjoy anything, but this is the most important aspect to me. If I'm not enjoying a car or a sim, what's the point in driving it? Also, side note, if you don't enjoy a sim or a car or series in that sim, don't attack the people that actually do enjoy it. It's fair to criticize the game, but just don't attack the people that enjoy something different from you. I'm being honest when I say I really do enjoy the GT3 experience in AMS2. I just enjoy the experience in ACC a little bit more. Not because I don't like AMS2, but the way ACC handles certain aspects are ways that I prefer. Even with the issues I have with the physics in AMS2, their GT3s are still a blast to drive, and it's also fun to take it around tracks that I normally don't get to drive in ACC. In conclusion, I gotta say that I'm honestly pleasantly surprised by the GT3s in AMS2. While not the most extremely realistic, in my opinion, it's still a whole lot of fun. I still think that Assetto Corsa Competizione is the top dog with GT3 cars, but with how much work AMS2 is putting in, it's only bringing very much welcomed competition to the sim racing market. When every developer is working to bring the best content, we as consumers will always win. Bottom line, if you have AMS2, give the GT3s a try. You could have more fun than you expect. If you don't have AMS2, maybe wait for a sale or something. I don't know. So, what do you think of the GT3s and AMS2? I would love to hear what you guys think. If you enjoyed, I would really appreciate if you hit the subscribe button and hit the like button, and I hope to see you in the next one. Have a good one.